all around the world, the word action is used. Well, most of the world, I suppose. And what happens is that everybody's ready to go, and they say turn over, and turn the camera. The sound man says the sound is running. Mark it. You do the clapperboard, and then the director says, action. What happened? Maybe it happens all over Japan, but what happened with Oshima was that the clap, and then he said, "Ya, ya, hi," like that. So the first time you had to sort of collect yourself and go back into the thing and start again. So there was always a long pause, from me anyway, after the ya ya hi, to collect my wits and get going again.
I knew Oshima, and I thought how interesting it would be to make a prisoner of war camp film like this. So different to Bridge of the River Kwai, a film which we all hold dear, and the sort of the stiff upper lip British point of view. This was made from a Japanese sensibility, from a very radical point of view. And it was a story of men who loved men. And it made it a very, very unusual take on a prisoner of war camp film. And I became very, very keen to make this film, and it was somewhat sort of a trailblazer for me as a sort of a role model for what my future films would be. Of course, I was seduced heavily by working with Oshima, one of my, heroic figures of cinema. I'm looking for an adventure when I may produce a film. Every so often, I'm looking for a film which is really a leap into the unknown. I'm looking for that. So I was, totally stimulated. And the names that Oshima was giving out, I was already aware of YMO. I didn't know who Kitano was, but I found out pretty quick who he was. And then Oshima wanted us to deliver to him the elements that he didn't understand. He wanted us to deliver casting suggestions and all the sort of Occidental area. He wanted us to deliver for him to declare on. And he was, happy and hungry for all that. After the script, we got into a state where we all believed in. We had to decide how I was going to find my portion of the money of the film, the money that wasn't coming out of Japan. I had a fantastic guy working with me called Terry Glinwood, who was a wonderful partner of mine, who was said to me, "You can shoot this film in a place called Rarotonga." I said, "Well, what?" "Yeah, Rarotonga is a New Zealand protectorate, and we can get a New Zealand tax deal if we shoot in this place, and it looks just like Java. And it's a tropical island, but it's got an airport which has been built as a runway for the Americans, and you can get a jumbo jet in there. It's got a couple of hotels, and I think it's a good place." So I went there with first of all, I went there. Then I took Oshima there with the designer, Toda, who'd done many, many Oshima films, who was a brilliant designer. He said, "I'll buy it. I'll buy it." And then I took him to Auckland, and he said, "I'll buy the station. I'll make this into Java Station, and I'll also make outside Auckland into the English countryside, which I'll make it some sort of fantasy." We looked at other places, but this thing really worked out because it came with money. And that is the film producer's dream, is to find a no-compromise location which has got some sort of deal behind it. And I'm always still looking for that when I'm making movies. How can I make a film and get extra value by shooting it somewhere?
そこにまずロケに行くよと言われた時に、うちにある地図を引っ張り出してみたんですが載ってないんですよね。そのくらい小さい島で非常に一種僕らにとっても異国情緒があるというか、それでマオリ族が住んでるところですね。でもすごく遠いんですけどもね、まずそういうとこに行けたと、そういう特別なとこに行くっていうことでも結構非日常的な気分になってるわけですね。
Casting was a crucial element of the film, and there was this crazy idea of Robert Redford to play the Bowie part at one point. And then Oshima settled on Bowie, and Bowie understood immediately who Oshima was. He knew. He's so understanding culture and everything that's going on around, and Bowie wanted to do the film, which we thought was incredibly brave and clever of him, because he could make a film in a world which was totally outside of his world. It was made in a desert island with no tourists. It was made in complete freedom with a Japanese whose sensibilities of making the film was so different from the regular movie. It was sort of like a journey into the exotic under controlled conditions.
その大島さんから連絡がある前に噂が飛び回っていて、大島さんの新しい映画にデイビッド・ボーイが出るらしいとかですね、北野武さんが出るらしいとかっていうのが耳に入っていたんですね。それでもうすでにすごい映画になりそうだなという、単に一つの映画っていうことを超えて何か大きなイベントのようなね感じになるなという、一ファンとしても期待に胸を膨らませていたんですが、そうしたらその大島さん本人から電話がかかってきて、お会いしたいというんで、これは頼まれるのかな、それは予想はしてなかったんですけど、少しドキドキしまして、そして約束の日時に大島さんが一人で小脇に台本を抱えて私の事務所にやってきまして、それ僕2階から見てたんですけど、とことこと一人で来るのを見ていまして、でミーティングが始まってですね、大島さんっていうのはとても単刀直入な方なんで、こういう映画で、出てくださいと。で僕はイエスという前に僕の方がですね、その映画の音楽もやらせてください、それだったら出ますと条件をつけたわけですね。ですぐ大島さんはもうその場で「はいいいですよ」っておっしゃったのね。ところが僕は映画に出演するのもその時はしたことないし、人生の中で映画の音楽も作ったことがない、両方とも初めてなのに、その初めて尽くしの人間に対してね「はいいいですよ」と即答するその大島渚というのは、これはちょっと勇気のある人間だなというかね、びっくりしましたね。
Sakamoto, he's a very, very handsome and very gifted in his own right. And I suppose he was the biggest rock star in Japan of the day. And that appealed when I discovered Oshima wanted him. It was Oshima's idea, it wasn't my idea at all. I suddenly understood, you understood, wow, he's absolutely Bowie and Sakamoto. That's the biggest Japanese rock star and Bowie. That's an interesting combination.
そうですね、大島さんが特にこの「センメリ」では、デビッド・ボーイ、僕北野武さんって役者じゃない人をメインの、役に配置してというのはね、僕らもそのことは話題にはしてたんですけど、武さんと僕とでどうしてだろうねなんていうことは、でも存在感ということなんだとは思うんですが、その当時出ていた男性だけが載っている白黒の写真集があったんですね。写真の本がね、稲越さんが確か撮った。でそこに僕は載っていたんですよ。でその中には当時のミュージシャンとか俳優とかの男性の、白黒の写真があって、それを見て決めたっていうんですよね、一枚の写真で。それもとても勇気のある方だなと思いますけど、祭壇があるんですよ。でそこで、僕とトム・コンティが向かい合ってですね、でトム・コンティが僕のことを罵倒したりするシーンがあるんですけども、僕はなかなかうまくいかなくて何度も NG を出してですね、なんせ相手がトム・コンティですからビビってですね、その度に僕の後ろにいる役者さんにね怒鳴りつけるんですね、大島さんは。臭い演出じゃないとかってね、よっぽど僕のことを怒鳴りつけたいはずなんだけども、その隣にいるプロに怒るというね、武さんの場合もそうなんですけど、怒られちゃうと萎縮して、でプロじゃないからっていうのはね、もともとその役者だったらそこで 生き抜いていかなければいけないけども、その場所でね、あるいはその映画というジャンルの中で生きていかなきゃいけないけど、僕らはほら本職は別にあるわけで、音楽とかね、お笑いとかあるでしょ。だからその怒らしちゃいけないんだなっていうのは、いわゆる使い方がうまかったんじゃないですかね、大島さんのね。
It was interesting because none of the three of them was an actor, except that Kitano was a natural actor. He just was, and a lot of comics are really very good actors. And you can think of a number of Americans who were comics. Alan King, for example, who is a smashing actor. And so he fell very easily into that. And Sakamoto wasn't, and he was having to speak English a lot of the time in the scenes with me. And that's tricky. It really is very, very tricky. And I remember he spoke very quietly, because that's what actors do. If they're not sure what they're doing, they speak very quietly and hope you won't notice they're there. So he spoke very quietly. But he grew in confidence once he realized that there was no magic to it. I mean, people think that there is some magic force that actors have, and there isn't. Most people can do some acting. In fact, all people act all the time when they're with someone else. You know, when you're at home on your own, you don't act. As soon as you go into a shop, you start acting, because you don't want to seem foolish. You want to get what it is you want to get, and this, for this, you employ the art of acting. You all do it. But then when you put a camera onto someone and say, okay, now do the acting, then it gets, they falter a little bit. But within a couple of days, they realized that there was no great mystique to it and got on with it.
I want him in good health as quickly as possible. That's an order.
David, of course, did have experience, and he was speaking his own language, so he had that advantage.
God help them, Lawrence. And that's our Captain Yonoi's voice, isn't it?
We didn't talk about methods or anything. I don't have a method. I just pretend, and so do most actors. They just pretend. You can pretend to a very high degree, but fundamentally, you're just pretending. And so we were pretending to be in a prison camp.
Tom was, I think, naturally he would be worried that he could play a Japanese-speaking soldier with such credibility. And he had a few script problems on the script. But then I think he suddenly probably saw some Oshima's films, and suddenly he took a leap of faith and said, okay, I'll do it.
It was a terrific story. And it was, again, to a youngster like me, well, I wasn't young, but in film terms I was, it was a real movie. It wasn't a little movie set in London and, getting in and out of taxis. It was going to, an exotic place with a big film crew to work with this exotic director. And I was a complete beginner at that time, and I really didn't know much about movies. I think I'd done 2 or 3, but, I was a greenhorn. Anyway, I got to Rarotonga and had my hair cut. You've got to get ready. When you're doing things, you sometimes have very strange hair that I have at the moment. Get your hair cut military style and get down to the Japanese. And there was a wonderful man called Roger Pulvers, who was a tremendous linguist. He spoke Russian, French, Italian, English, and Japanese, and God knows how many other languages. For the week before filming began, Roger and I pounded up and down the beach all day, every day, with him bashing this Japanese into my head and the pronunciations and what it all meant and all the rest of it. And of course, in movies, you do little bits at a time. And so I was, obviously this was going to make things easier. So it turned up, and it was day 1 of shooting. And I had this long scene with Takeshi. And I said to Oshima, how are we going to do this? Well, many setups. She said, well, 1, I said, you want to do it in one take? The scene lasted about 5.5 minutes or something. He said, will you be able to do that? And I said, oh, yes. I said, blimey. So we started, and we did it. We did it, and the camera moved around, and we did it, the whole thing in a one.
I didn't know Tom beforehand. I just had the meetings with him and said, you are the guy who I see as Sir Lawrence van der Post, having met Sir Lawrence van der Post, and thinking about the quality of actor. I needed a quality vehicle for Oshima to drive. I mean, I remember working with on the second or third film I did, I had a director who was working with Alan Bates, and he turned to me and he said, Jeremy, thank you. You've given me a Rolls Royce to drive. What do you mean, Yoshi? He said, because when I'm driving the Bates, I'm driving the Rolls Royce. And I remembered that. And for a director to get an actor like Alan Bates and John Hurt, Tom Conti, in those sort of British trained actors who can do anything, great road holding and great acceleration, good top speed, and they're stable, reliable, and it's the driving a Rolls Royce, of a certain sort of actor. And without having to go into a different sort of mode, they just actors, profession, actor. And that is what Oshima needed.
I actually wasn't very good in this picture. I didn't know it at the time, but I wasn't, because I was doing too much English acting. And I learned that later. When I looked at it, I thought, God, blimey, he's awful, son. But that was part of the greenhorn thing. And later in that year, I did another movie called Reuben, and I'd sorted it out by then, and in fact got nominated for it because I got rid of all the acting. But I'm afraid Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence suffered a bit from my acting.
素晴らしい役者だと思うんだけど、日常で会うトムはもっと穏やかなんですね。映画で見るよりももっと穏やかな感じで、紳士でね。果たしてこの人人生の中で起こったり感情的になったことがあるのかなと不思議に思うぐらいね、紳士でね。役の中ではちょっと感情的になったりするの、それはもう本当に一つの技術として、だけどそれは嘘じゃなくて迫真の演技でやってるんだけども、僕が間違えるとカメラが回ってない時に優しくね励ましてくれたりとかね、少しびっくりしましたね、それはね。
I had no knowledge of Oshima when I started this at all, but of course I went off and got a copy of Realm of the Senses. I know Korida, wasn't it? And I thought, oh, blimey, and I had a love scene in the picture. It didn't end up on the screen. It didn't make the final cut, but we did do it. And I thought, what's he going to want us to do? It might be quite a bit bizarre, having seen, all the hijinks on the other one. And so the awful thing, of course, is that you meet the girl that you're going to be in bed with that morning in the makeup room. And you get made up and you then get into bed and she's naked. And I wasn't, for decency's sake, but, and you play the scene. But I'd said to Oshima, Oshima said, what are you going to do? I thought, oh, God, here it comes. And I said, well, I mean, is there anything special that you want us to do? She's sitting there thinking, oh, God, what? And he said, no, just normal. I said, oh, no, normal is good. Yes, we can do normal. Missionary, all right?
It turned into, I think, everybody will say, it was one of the greatest happy moments in making a movie, because it was a real adventure, making the film, the two nations, the British, which I would include the New Zealanders and the Australians, and then the Japanese. And it was a co-production, true co-production, with technicians, principally Japanese, but some important technicians in the European roles set and costume areas, and then the actors, and then the sort of backup and producing function. So it became an extension of the movie as well, the background of the film being made. It had many of the tensions of understanding when you make films in different countries with people who come from a different tribe from you. Completely, you have to do. It's an additional challenge, an additional possible benefit for a film.
その島が本当に小さいので1ヶ月ぐらいみんなで一緒にいましたから、とてもお互いのこともよく知ることができたし仲良くなりました。ある日島で割と早く撮影が終わった時に、大きな食堂があるんですけども、そこにドラムセットがね、ドラムキットが置いてあって、でなんとなくみんなもお酒飲んだし、そのデビッド・ボーイと僕で2人でセッションを始めてね、そう自然にデビッド・ボーイがその昔のロックンロールの有名なナンバーをたくさんギターを弾きながら歌い出して、僕が下手なドラムでつけてですね、随分やってましたね。30分ぐらいやってたんじゃないですかね、2人だけで。それをみんなが見ててわーなんていうね、それもいい思い出ですね。
When I was told that David was in the picture, I thought, oh, that's jolly interesting. Although I didn't really know much about him, because in rock music was just never my scene. I wasn't brought up on that kind of music. I was brought up on Verdi and Beethoven. So that was that. And I knew that he was phenomenally famous because I'd seen all his record covers. I didn't have any of his records, but I knew I knew the covers, and I knew who he was. So I thought, well, that's interesting. That might be good fun. And indeed it was. And I didn't find some kind of crazy rock star. I found a very hard-working man, serious about his work and gets on with it.
混合舞台でだからそのいろんな、メイキャップやカメラさんやライティング、いろんな人たちがみんな国が違うっていうのがね、とても面白かったですね。僕も映画自体初めての体験なのに、それがそういうふうに日本人だけじゃなくていろんな国の人がね集まって一緒にものを作るっていうのを初めて見て、でね、素朴な感想ですけど、映画を作るってなんてたくさんの人間が共同して参加しなきゃいけないんだろうっていうのをまずそれにびっくりして、言ってみれば少し軍隊のようなね、こう大きな組織でね、音楽を制作することのもう1桁も2桁も大きなサイズの仕事なんだなと思ってね、その頂点にいるその監督っていう仕事っていうのは大変だなとつくづく思いましたね。
There were hundreds of people in some of those scenes, and we had to bring those people from New Zealand. It was very hard to find 250 emaciated people, but we put the ads in the papers. An incredible casting call we had in Auckland. We were flying up to Rarotonga in a plane, private. We'd rented a DC-8 or something, 250 seats. And they arrived in Rarotonga, these people. I mean, they're really in bad shape. They looked like people who'd been 4 years on the chain gang. A lot of them were detained by the immigration and sent back to Auckland, but we had like 230 of them came to the set, and we filmed for one day, and the next morning we're due to film the whole next day, and then they were like, midday, Oshima said, I've wrapped. I said, what? He said, no, I've finished. I said, but hang on, we've got all these people, we brought them up from Auckland, and it was very expensive. What do you mean you're finished? You got to I said, I've done it. Didn't want to waste the stock. Why waste it? I'm not going to use it. I know what I'm going to have. I'm going to have that shot, and that shot, and that's what it's going to be. So that was very, it was a big lesson for me early on.
Although I was a novice, really, in movies, I did know that normally you did a number of takes of every setup. And the great surprise was that Oshima didn't do this. He used almost always only one take. You do only one take. And if anyone said, could we go again? Then if it was a Japanese crew person, then he would absolutely, why? What did you do wrong? But if it was myself or David, he would say, why? And you would explain why. And he would either say, or yes. And we would do it again. But we were all slightly frightened of him, because he had a great charisma to him, and he was quite stern.
映画の一番最初にヨノイが出てくる、最初に観客が見るシーンがあるんですよ。でね、それはヨノイは白馬に乗って登場するということになっていたわけです、台本ではね。それで僕は1週間前からその白馬に乗る練習をさせられてですね、ラロトマ島の砂浜でその白馬君と一緒にこう乗って練習して、その馬とも仲良くなったんですが、いざ本番という時に多分僕の緊張が伝わっちゃったんでしょうね。馬がびくとも動かないんですねそれで何度やっても動かなくてですね、そしたらもうその例のその大島さんの怒りが爆発しまして、もうなんかどうでもいい、すぐ歩けってその馬をどうしようじゃなくて、その時のなんていうのかな、こう自分の中のテンションがこう落ちるのが嫌なんでしょうね、その大島さん自身ね。
All the problems that came up, he made into an opportunity. And I was refreshed by that, seeing sort of the lack of making it difficult. Japanese cinema is very parsimonious. They don't waste money at all. And they want to shoot film very fast, and they don't shoot a lot of film stock, and they don't want to. It's an opposite of how we make films. It's the bigger and the more takes and everything is better. But for a Japanese, they want to take one. I got to take one proud, take one perfect. There was a mistake in it. That mistake was meant to be there. I'm happy with it.
だからその時にちょっと悪条件で雲が出てこようが馬が動かなくてもそんなことは小さいことで、一番大事なその役者のなんですか、ちょっとした感情の動き、一回しか起きないかもしれないその動きですね、感情というか、それを捕まえたいんだと思うんですね、想像するに。
He was a director who grew up by standing next to the camera, understanding the lens, looking at the operator and saying, "Did you get it? Yes, I got it," and trusting that. Today, people are crawling over 5 video monitors. It's not the relationship anymore of an camera operator looking through the lens with the director. Did we get it? Yes, Governor, we got it. That is the confidence, and that's real filmmaking for me. And Hitchcock worked like that, and all our favorite filmmakers. Not with somebody, a director, remote from the action, standing 100 meters from the set under a tent. I mean, where I started working, the director was standing next to the camera, looking into the eyes of the actor. And therefore, it's a different experience, and you can take one. Yeah, if it's in focus, yeah, take one, print it, let's move on.
I've never met anyone who worked as Oshima did. I suppose the closest was Bob Altman. I did 2 pictures with him, and he's fairly spare. He doesn't go on and on and on. Kubrick like take 96 of lifting the cup. The actors almost always, well, my generation does think that you have to get it all ready for take one, because there's a magic to take one. So it is disappointing if suddenly, the boom has come into shot or something has gone wrong, you have to do it again, because it takes another 5 takes to get back to what you did in take one, sometimes more. Depends how complicated the thing is. But it can take that's a shame. And that's what Oshima wanted. He wanted the magic first take.
There's a master filmmakers, and then there are the others, And the master filmmaker is painting the painting and they understand exactly what they're doing. And it's not a hit or miss. There are many styles of filmmaking. There's a style of filmmaking of putting up 10 cameras and shooting a dozen with 10 camera angles on every shot. Then you hand it to a brilliant editor and you go and see the assembly. That is a way of making movies. Or you're somebody who grew up in a different way, who was trained in a certain way, and you understand every shot and the nuance, and you've seen the film in your head. The master filmmaker has seen the film in his head, whether it be, Cronenberg, Bertolucci, Nick Rowe, Oshima. They exactly know what they want. They know the frame, they've thought about it, they've made it over and over again, they know the parameters of what can go wrong or right, and they are able to make films like that. And that was the old way of what a master filmmaker was: a master crafts, master builder, master violin maker, master painter, master scent maker, a master. And they're master filmmakers too, of which Oshima was one.
鮮明の時の小道具の方がいて、これはすごくもう当時80ぐらいのおじいさんで、小津組の小道具だったんですよね。それがわざわざその撮影のために確か伊勢神宮だかに行ってですね、このお札を取ってきてその僕たちにかけてくれて、でそれお札はですから見えないんですよ。で服の中に入っているんです。その画面の映らないところまで気を配るというなんか小津組のなんですかね、まあ、伝統なのかなんかその映画を作る人間のなんか執念とか情熱とか誇りとか。
Oshima was similar to, I know it's riffing a bit, but Kieslowski. So I met with Kieslowski to work with him at one point. I never did a film with him, unfortunately. But he said to me about his crew, I want to change my crew because I want to have the opportunity to change every time I make a movie. And I'm stimulated by changing my cameraman and my technicians. Whereas traditionally a filmmaker falls in love with a personality and a film technician and then work with him time and again. Oshima was, because he came up through the studio system, was, you know, you get so-and-so, you get that man and you're going to be happy with it, you know. So he was somebody who liked to work with people he knew, but it wasn't a religion to him. He didn't have to. He didn't sort of stamp his feet if he couldn't have his regular crew. But on this particular film, he had a cameraman who was a pretty legendary character called Narushima. And he was very, very rigorous and immaculate, very, very polite and correct. And one day we came to do a scene, Kanemoto, the character called Kanemoto, he had to be beheaded. And the actor who was doing it, the Japanese actor who had to do it, held a sword, and then it was shown by an assistant director, and he attacked the dummy. And then at a certain point, Narushima shouted at him in Japanese and grabbed the sword and then took it and just sliced this dummy's head off in one move. Everybody was a bit shocked, and I said to Roger Pulvers, or somebody who understood, he said, "What's going on?" And I said, "Oh yeah, he did that in the war a few times." So he was an old soldier who had a real skill with a sword. He was our DOP as well. I don't think I'd have been, you know, it was incredible to see him leap into action like that. And he was, you know, I treated him with a you know different eye after that because he was incredibly fast and nimble. And then Oshima's designer, who he'd worked with many times, called Toda, who created the sets. He was very much a sort of free thinker and free liver, very, very different to the DOP, but worked very closely the opposite. When he saw the valley we were going to have to shoot in and build a set in 6 weeks, he said, "No problem." I said, "What are you talking about?" "No problem." He said, "When you come to shoot this scene on this set, wherever the film set is and our building process, that'll be the prisoner war camp, because do you believe it? This prisoner war camp, when they arrived, was in construction." And that's brilliant. How brilliant is that? Okay, it would have been in construction. They were constructing a prison war camp. We don't have to build the whole prison war camp. We'll lay out a few, and we'll only have to build 6 of these huts instead of building 20 of these huts. And that's brilliant. You understand, now I understand everything about the Japanese way, because they made it more brilliant and more economic, you know.
It's very spare, the style of the picture. You know, there's not a lot of, even today we're used to, you know, 30 cuts a second. It drives me nuts. You're not allowed to look at anything for any length of time. But the pace of that movie and the elegance of the setups and the lengths of the takes is really wonderful. It has great pace because the energy is in the narrative and in the people.
これは単に日本とイギリスとかね、東洋と西洋の違う文化背景の2人の男というだけではなくて、例えば戦う人同士の誇りっていうんですかね、敵だとしてもその尊敬し合える 誇りを持った戦士でに対してはねやはり好きになっちゃう。その愛情っていう感情がねたとえ敵で今殺さなきゃいけないって言ってもその一種の愛情みたいな感情が生まれるのではないかなと思いますね。単なるホモセクシャルとは違うんじゃないかなと。もう少しその戦士としてのでつまり戦士っていうのはその死に一番近いところにいる人間たちですよね。いつも死との隣り合わせにいるんでそういうことも関係あるのかなと。
Selliers was not, I don't think, homosexual. And I'm not sure even that the commandant was, but he had found himself fascinated and in some way attracted to this English soldier. It was sort of heroic and rather beautiful and all of that. And Selliers used this. He saw it, understood it, and used it to destroy them both, really. You know, he knew that his action when he marched up to the commandant, he knew that he was signing his own death warrant and also that the commandant would be disgraced.
もうその時点で自分でもう切腹でもするぐらいの、人もいたかもしれないけどもどうなのかなっていうのはそれはうまく僕はもうそういう世代ではないからわからないですが一応設定としてはそうなのでただそこにはその気になってしょうがない、ジャックに抱擁されるわけですからその歓喜っていうかな嬉しさの喜びもうこれ以上の喜びはないような歓喜とともにその、戦士としての恥辱っていうのかなそれをどうやって表すかっていうのは僕は役者ではないのでテクニックでできることはないので最初僕はだからシーン目をつぶってたのかなつまり歓喜であるとともにそのこれ以上の恥辱はないわけですからそれをこらえるためにこういう目をつぶったような演技をしたんだけどそれは監督がねその時はほとんどただ1回ぐらいですかね僕に注文出したのは目はしっかり開いた方がいいというふうに大島さんが言いましたね。
The other relationship in the film is between Tom Conti and Sergeant Hara. There was the class aristocrat and then the working soldier of Hara from the low ranks. He really felt for Mr. Lawrence.
やはりこの映画の一番最後のシーンですね自分は出てないんですけども撮影現場に行っていてやっぱり感動しましたね。みんな泣いてましたもん。カメラの後ろが今度はたけしさんの方が捕虜になってという、ローレンスが会いに来てそういうことはあるんですけどそのストーリーはあるんだけどそれを感動したというよりかはたけしさんの顔ですねやっぱりねまん丸の顔それがもう画面いっぱいに大写しになるでしょ。でねその丸さというのかなただ頭を剃ってねまん丸の顔っていうのは言ってみればその聖人セイント
メリークリスマスミスター・ローレンス
になっている怖かった鬼軍曹が今はもうセイントになっているというその変身に感動するんだと思うんですね。
The film still has a sort of currency in its values, and in today's warring planet, it is so strong. It says everything that we believe. We are victims of men who think they're right. So when you see that in a movie, subtly smuggled in by Oshima with a knockout punch at the end of the film, they show that film today to people, and they really get it.